Hey everyone, welcome back to Outside is Magic, a podcast about the intersection of creativity and outdoors. I'm your host, Christopher San Agustin. Today I'm talking with Tom Briggs, a designer, storyteller, and a creative force behind some of the most recognizable work in the cycling and outdoor world. We talked about the design process, creative confidence, burnout, veganism, student loan documentaries, and how to keep building a life that actually reflects who you are. This one's jam-packed, so let's jump in. Thanks, Tom, for jumping on the podcast. Before I kind of jump in and ask you about all the cool stuff you're doing, I was kind of wondering if you could just give us a little breakdown on where you're from and like how you got started in all this.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's great to be here, Chris. Really appreciate you taking the time to reach out. So yeah, so I'm from Vancouver originally, up in Canada. I moved around a bunch though when I was younger. So born here, but lived in Chile for a little while in Santiago as a teenager. Then ended up moving back to Canada and lived in Edmonton for a few years, which is where my family's still at. But I only made it 3 years there before I turned 18 and decided I was done with the prairies. I didn't really want to live somewhere that flat. So came back here for a bit, met my partner, Courtney, and then we moved to Toronto for like almost 13 and a half years. And that's where I did schooling. Started my career as a designer out there. And yeah, that's kind of what got me going. Like going out east to do my design degree was kind of like the impetus to kind of get me moving in this direction. But I think it all kind of started like a long time before that. I think like anybody kind of on a design journey, there's sort of, interest in art and sort of visuals. And I think for me, I was always kind of into that stuff, but I think my like growing up, I think I was kind of like a sports kid. Like I played a lot of soccer, swam, played basketball, you name it, I probably tried it. And then as I got older, because of all that moving around, I wasn't able to take art classes for the last few years of high school. I switched, I moved between countries. So I landed at a new school and they'd be like, oh, like you don't have the credits for like this thing. So you got to take this class again or whatever. And so I'd always end up not being able to take an art class and I have to take like another math or a science or something. And then once I got to university, because I hadn't been taking art, I thought, okay, that wasn't really an option. So I went into political science and did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed it, but ultimately kind of thought like, is this what I'm going to do like forever? And ultimately decided no. So I dropped out of that. And then so I met Courtney and she was going to art school for photography. And like, I was just like totally naive, like a really dumb, like 19-year-old and was like, you can make a living doing that. And she was like, well, yeah, obviously. And I like, I'd never even thought about it. And she was like, well, you draw. Like I was painting graffiti and stuff at the time. She was like, "You're pretty good at that. Like, why don't you apply to art school?" And so I did. I got rejected 4 times. I've actually got in on the fifth try. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me here.
Wow. Why do you think you got rejected from getting into art school?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm sure the portfolio wasn't very good. Like because I didn't, I hadn't taken any high school art. So basically, the last time I took a art class in high school was maybe like grade 10, and I didn't get to do grade 11 or 12. It might have even been grade 9, actually, that was the last time. So I didn't really have like a high school art portfolio. Like I didn't have any of that kind of work. So anything I was showing them was just like stuff I was making in my bedroom, stuff that I painted on the street. I don't think I quite understood necessarily how to like put together a portfolio that would make somebody go like, oh, like we should let this kid in here. And so yeah, they decided no. I did eventually go to community college for an art program. That's kind of what got me going in the right direction. Yeah, I thought I was going to painting major, because that's what I was sort of into, but I sort of discovered design while I was there. I started making t-shirts with friends and stuff like that. Thought, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, this is a way to sort of, I don't know, express yourself in a way that you can get out there. And it wasn't necessarily there was no financial reward in it at the time. Like it wasn't something we were making money at. It was just something that we thought was cool, wanted to do, and it for me it eventually tied into bikes. It was like a company called Skitch Clothing. It was super tiny. Like it wasn't even like registered as a name or anything. It was just like we were making t-shirts and selling them at like local bike shops and stuff. But yeah, did that and then I from there made a fixed gear video called The Revival with some friends. This is like 2008 or so. And I think that kind of showed me like you can just kind of do stuff if you want to. Like you don't necessarily have to wait for somebody's permission. Like I spent part of my student loan to make the film. I basically just like we were just broke, flat broke, and I took a student loan for like a semester's worth and like invested that in like renting cameras and buying some plane tickets and paying for gas and stuff for us to go sleep on people's couches and film this video. And it worked out well. Like we did like, I don't know, like 60 or some odd like global premieres and we got like a
Wow.
distribution deal for it and stuff like that. Like it became like a thing, which was cool. It kind of showed me like you can kind of make it whatever you can kind of make things whatever you want as long as you're just sort of willing to put it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's funny. I did the exact same thing with my student loans. I bought a camera and was filming BMX videos.
Sick.
And then I
Yeah.
got into motion graphics, so I was making the title sequences for these videos. Not waiting for permission comes up a lot. And yeah, it's so important to just
I think
encourage
so.
people just to do it and not wait.
Definitely. Yeah. Like my interests like as a kid and yeah, even now still like I got really into like punk and hardcore as a young kid and like that kind of just shows you like that sort of DIY kind of ethics and I don't know like you don't have to have somebody like even at work like sometimes we don't get a brief for a project although it can be annoying it's like I don't know, like if you really feel strongly in a direction, like you can kind of take it that way. Most people won't get in your way. Like you'll have people that there's always going to be naysayers that think like, oh, like you pushed this too far, you've done something that maybe isn't quite right for the brand or whatever. But at the end of the day, like I think if you're not trying to push the envelope, like you're probably just making something that's fairly average. So yeah, I think like punk and hardcore kind of like influenced me with just saying, screw it, like I'll just take a crack at it if it's something I feel strongly about.
Yeah. Is there a good example of you pushing the limits and having to really fight for a design or a concept?
I would say that's almost every single one. This is like a perpetual problem in my career. Yeah, I think that I don't know. I don't think I'm like very satisfied ever. Not that I don't. Everyone can be their own worst critic, and I don't want us to come across as like, oh, I hate everything I've ever made. Like it's not that way. But I think that I'm often trying to improve. Every project to me is kind of like a new chance to do something a little bit better. At this point, I've designed thousands of bikes. Like, it's not like I'll ever need another bike in a portfolio. So it's really just like a self motivation. And because of that, like you're going to make things that make people, I think, a little bit uncomfortable that are, signing the checks or have oversight and so, yeah, there's this constant sort of headbutting with that. I think the Olympics was a good example of that potentially. Like we did a collection called the Forward 50 collection. It was so the Olympics coincided with the 50th anniversary of Specialized, which was interesting. And so we wanted to have something that was both for the Olympics as its sort of launch point, but also make it a sort of a look back to say, hey, we've reached 50 years, but we didn't want the graphics to feel nostalgic. That wasn't the goal. It was like, just because we've made it 50 years, we want to show you kind of where we're going or what potentially we could be doing. And so it was really trying to look future forward. And that definitely, it makes people nervous. People are generally comfortable with what they know and they've seen before. And so for us to provide something that was so dynamic looking, so kind of polarizing in its appearance, you're going to have some people that love it and you're going to have some people that hate it. But I kind of think that's generally better. Like if somebody utterly hates something, there's good chances somebody else absolutely loves it and is going to want it. But if it's just kind of middle of the road, like, everyone might go, oh, that's all right. That's cool. But are they really going to want to fork out the money for it? Or is it really going to cause people to turn their heads, that kind of thing? So I think that would be a good example. And ultimately, I think everybody at the company came around to the idea eventually. And I think we all sort of embraced it, but it took a while for us to not kind of just do some like throwback graphic to like, our early heritage days, that kind of thing.
So after designing so many bikes, I imagine you kind of have somewhat of a process, but have you said you were trying to push concepts? How do you do that? Do you look outside of your normal pool of inspiration, or has there been any kind of aha moments where you've discovered something really special that you've tried to incorporate into your future bikes?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think so. I think the idea of like a process, like it comes up a lot. Like I don't think I have one set process because I think that projects are pretty dynamic. So it depends on what the project is ultimately looking to achieve. So For example, if I'm working with like a pro athlete, like one of our downhill racers, like in those instances, we're trying to make something that's sort of specific to an individual. So my first step would be let's connect with that individual, talk with them, find out what's going on in their head, find out what's going to resonate with them, find out how they want to be represented. And oftentimes you're going to get little bits and pieces. Like it's not necessarily going to be a clear, defined idea. Like not athletes generally won't come to you and say, I want the bike to look exactly like this. That almost never happens. But they might be like, oh, like I saw this thing, it's kind of cool. Like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this sort of thing, whether that's like a political piece, if that's kind of just like a fashion piece, is that something that they've just kind of, they want to tell a story about their childhood or their family or their history, something like that. And it's kind of my job to sort of take those bits and pieces and sort of start to coalesce them into something that could be like an outcome, like a visual outcome. So that would be kind of how I would approach that for like an individual athlete. Teams are a little bit different because generally you have sort of sponsors involved. With a sponsorship, there's a lot of rules and regulations where things can fit, how they can be seen, stuff like that. So you're trying to kind of create within the gaps. There's all these sort of defined sections that have to be the way they are, but then you're given these sort of spaces in the middle. And I think that for me, it's trying to understand how it's going to be seen, how it's going to be understood, what the visuals are going to be for it. So is that like if it's a pro road team, for example, like you're often dealing with helicopter shots from above, so you got to kind of take into consideration their back. If it's a front on shot, front of the helmet is definitely sort of the most visible. If they're talking in an interview on camera afterwards, kind of like we're talking right now, like it's generally kind of here up. So you got to kind of consider branding and things like that, but also still make sure that the design is appealing and interactive and interesting. And then when it comes to production, we work years in advance. Like it's what May of 2025 right now, and I'm looking at things that'll come out in late 2027, early 2028. So generally,
Wow.
that's a bit more a collective understanding amongst the team that I work on. So we have a CMF side of our team, and then we have our concept design side, which is sort of what I fall into. So it's our job to kind of build the graphics for each individual bike and kind of build up the line plans and what it's going to look like. But ultimately, we want to make sure we all collectively agree on color palette, any technique usage that we're going to be developing for the coming years, and then sort of trying to figure out where we're going to place that. Whether, is this technique appropriate for road? Is it appropriate for mountain? Is it appropriate for an active bike? And then what colors then are attractive to that type of rider and consumer? Pro road rider, like somebody that's really into racing, that's one aesthetic versus somebody that wants to go for, to get their groceries on their bike versus somebody who wants to go, out into the forest and explore, mountain bike trails with their friends. So really it's trying to understand each individual sort of segment. So in terms of like one process, I don't have like one distinct process. I think there's a number of processes that we go through depending on the type of project. And it's not just bikes that we're working on too. Like I work on apparel sometimes. We do some publication stuff, but occasionally, very occasionally, which is kind of fun. It's nice to sort of mix things up. And then yeah, helmets, footwear, stuff like that as well. So it's not just bikes, but that would be the majority of my output.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you even go around about designing so far forward in the future? It's quite the commitment to having to sign off on something that'll be showing up in a couple of years down the road.
For sure. Yeah, I think there's no like one way to do it. I think the nice thing is I work on a team of really talented other individuals. It's not just me. It's us collectively all kind of looking at different spaces. We're not pulling inspiration from the cycling industry. Like we all pay attention. We all love it. It's something that we're all passionate about. We're all interested in. But I think if you're just looking at what other bike companies are doing, like we're not going to be looking far enough out in the future. And we'll also just kind of end up looking like everybody else. So I think it's really a conscious decision for us to find inspiration elsewhere. And there's other segments of businesses and looking at the art world where you can kind of see kind of what might start to be resonating, what might be percolating, and kind of how that could potentially roll into the cycling sphere. So I think one good example would be footwear, athletic footwear. It runs on a faster time sort of cadence. So generally there's like a couple drops a year, usually so maybe a spring, a summer, and then a fall winter collection, something like that. And generally the price point is significantly lower. You're looking at like max, like what, like $300 kind of thing, compared to like a $10 to $15,000 bicycle, and kind of see what's starting to get processed through that industry and in terms of colors, and then that could potentially inform us. And I'm not saying that's exactly where all our ideas come from. Like that's just one of many. I also think that we look at the art world pretty consistently. We look at automotive as well. We're definitely pretty curious about fashion. And yeah, I think ultimately like there's no one spot, but to find something that you feel confident in, I think there's a good collective understanding amongst the team. There's about 11 of us on the team, and that allows for us to bounce ideas off of one another and help distill down an idea. And then we come forward with a color palette annually that has like a fully built concept around it. It's not just like, oh, we think this purple's cool and this red is good and that orange is good. We're looking at like a broader concept, whether that's like, I think historically we've looked at like things in nature and kind of like, how that can kind of affect sort of the overall look and feel. We've looked at all kinds of different ideas, and really we try to position it as a conceptual piece so that we're not just kind of pulling at random, trying to build a bit more of a story into it.
That's super cool. What does collaboration look like? Are you all located in the same area? Or are you working remote or going into the office different times? Or
I'm kind of the unique one. I'm the remote person on the team. There's only two remote individuals on our team, myself and Morgan, who's our design coordinator. But I'm the only like concept designer that's remote. Everybody else lives kind of in and around the Bay Area. The office is in Morgan Hill, California. So they work out of there. It's right now it's a bit of a hybrid approach since COVID. A few days a week in office, a few days a week out of office. I personally like when they're out of office. It's easier to get a hold of people. They're at their computer. I can send them a message. I get an answer right away. But yeah, in terms of collaboration, like I just try to make myself as available as possible. Pretty on top of making sure that there's no unread emails in my inbox, making sure that there's no unread messages in our team chat or Slack chat. Making sure that if somebody's got a question, I'm there to answer it. Based on the hierarchy of our team. I'm sort of the most senior of the designers on the team. And so I don't manage anybody, but as being the most senior designer, able to provide feedback as much as possible. And so I think making sure that you're available and understanding that other people may have a question or they might have a need at any given moment is helpful and critical. Uh, we all work really well together. I feel fortunate. I work on probably the most sort of united team I've ever worked on in my design career. I've been doing this for 16 or so years, and so it feels like everybody's kind of pushing in sort of the same direction, and we all kind of have a mutual understanding of one another and what works for one individual and how to talk to them, and maybe we have to talk with somebody a little bit differently, but everybody's super professional, and also we just enjoy each other's time. It's like super friendly atmosphere. Like we hang out even outside of work, which is nice when I am down there.
nice. Yeah, so you're at Specialized as a principal concept designer. Is that your role?
Yeah, that's my title. That title may not necessarily mean much outside of the business. A lot of times when you're working sort of in-house at places, they come up with these sort of long-winded
Yeah.
titles. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Essentially, it means that I'm sort of like the lead graphic designer for our bicycle product. That's really what it sort of amounts to. My main focus day to day is I do all of our production mountain bike graphics. So if you were to walk into a Specialized retailer or go on a Specialized website and look at any mountain bike that we're doing, odds are pretty damn high that I touched it in some manner in terms of graphics. And then we have another designer who sort of heads up road and another designer who heads up active. Those are sort of our three bucket categories that we sort of work within. And then being the most senior person, I'll often provide feedback to both of them to ensure that we're all kind of working in the same direction. It's kind of how it goes.
Cool. As a designer, are you also working with paint, or is that also just a collaboration with other people?
I can, because I'm remote, I don't have access to the paint booths on a regular basis. So we have a in-house painter, Isaac, who I work with very regularly. Oftentimes, I'll need to size out something, say a decal offering that's on a particular like a new platform. So I'll ask him to size it out if we're doing a new paint technique or I need some paint colors sprayed out. We can do that as well. We can paint whole bikes there, which is nice to have that sort of facility available to us. I think that was one big draw for me coming to Specialized was just access to the resources that we have as a company of that scale. And then we also have Tyler Marchesano, who's been around with the company for a long time. He used to be our in-house painter, now is one of our CMF designers. And yeah, just a wealth of knowledge on paint and how it sort of functions. I've been doing this for a long time as well, so I think there's a pretty like significant knowledge base. I worked for a different bike company prior to Specialized. There's a lot of shared knowledge amongst the group. And yeah, if I need to work with paint, I can go down, use the paint booth. I would say that the strong majority of the time I'm working with our in-house painters. It just doesn't make sense for me to necessarily fly all the way down there to paint something that they could paint. And because they're in the booth every day, like their skill set is just that much greater than mine at this point.
Yeah. Thinking a little bit before Specialized, was there a monumental role or project that kind of kicked you off in your career that led you to eventually to Specialized?
So I think like there's a bunch. Like obviously when it's been this long, like you're going to have moments throughout the line that kind of push your career in certain directions. I think for me, I think probably the most important project of my career was probably the first project of my career. I was an intern. So between my third and fourth year at university, I applied for an internship at a really small studio called Threadwinner. It was owned by two guys, Ben and Nick, great dudes. And I had met Ben previously, sort of through the cycling scene, and I had asked for like an internship, and he agreed. He thought, hey, that sounds cool. You're into design. He thought the portfolio was half decent for a third year design student. It was nothing spectacular by any means, but enough for an internship. And so I went and worked there a few days a week. And I remember one day he came downstairs. Their office was sort of on a mezzanine that sat at a desk down below. And I remember he came downstairs one day and he was like, there was two other interns. There was three of us at the time. It's kind of, we never really had that many. It was usually only ever two, but for some reason at that moment there were three interns. And so he came down the stairs and he said, "Hey, we got a new contract. It's with a company called Moog Music." Um, and at the time I pronounced it Moog because it's spelled M-O-O. And it's a synthesizer company based in North Carolina and pretty legendary in the music world. And I remember the other two interns, like, like no fault of their own. I just don't think they were necessarily aware of it. I'm like, okay, cool. I, being as into music as I was, had certainly heard of it, thought like, damn, like this is awesome. Like I'm really excited about this. And I kind of made it known, like, this is sick. Like I think that's awesome that we got that. I'd love to work on it. Like, is there anything I can do? Like, please let me know. Ben, he ultimately thought that I showed enough interest in this that he kind of let me run with it. He was like, how about you take a crack at this? And like, I have to emphasize, like, he was very much watching over this. Like, it wasn't like I was completely left to my own devices. He kept me on the rails because it could have gone off the rails at any moment with somebody that young and unsure. And it was a pretty big contract, but we worked on that. And I think that gave me like the confidence that like I could do something for like a kind of an international client, like somebody at that scale. Moog's not enormous, but it's certainly big in that space. And so we rebranded them, did all their new packaging, built out kind of the whole look and feel, website design, you name it, like the whole shebang, like everything. And then like that doesn't really have anything to do with cycling, but I think it kind of gave me a taste of what design can be like in that professional setting. Because prior to that, it was all schoolwork or just stuff that I was doing on my own. And so I think that one was important. And then I think later down the road, I think you sort of learn through uh, not mistakes, but just like steps you make on your career path. You kind of find out what you're into and what you're not. When Breadwinner closed, I went and worked in a publishing house for a little while, designing skateboarding magazines. I had already been doing that at Breadwinner, so I just kind of carried over to the publishing house. After that, I took a crack at working in advertising. In advertising, I did it for about a year, and I very quickly realized like it just wasn't what made me tick. The content wasn't the things that I was interested in, and the notion of just pushing pixels around even when I wasn't interested didn't hold my attention the way I wanted it to. So I think acknowledging that and going, okay, I need to find a space where I can work where I am really like kind of both challenged but also really engaged with what the product is or what the what it is the message that we're trying to send, what we're doing. It needed to kind of change for me, and so a friend of mine, Antonio, sent me noticed that he had heard that a company called Cervelo, a road bike company, was looking, and I applied, and I didn't know anybody there, and went through all the interviews, like a whole gauntlet of them, and eventually landed the job and became like the only in-house graphic designer at the company, and kind of took on everything that I could, and yeah, kind of just found my way through that. And then Specialized became aware of me through that, and they contacted me and asked if I'd be interested in the job. So that's kind of what got me here. There were plenty of things at Cervelo that were interesting. Getting to do the 2016 Olympic bikes for Great Britain, that was like huge. I think that really had a big moment. They won 11 medals. They were probably the most successful team on the track. I was working with like F1 suppliers to make ultra lightweight paint, and yeah, trying to do things that were kind of different. And then I also think like the 2015 Tour de France was a big deal as well. Got to design the bikes for the first ever African team in the tour in its 101-year history at that point. So it's Team MT in Quebec, and yeah, it's kind of things like that. Like I sort of put myself in position to kind of get to work on sort of those moments that I think got me noticed within the cycling world. And like I'm no huge name or anything like that, but I think that like the people that were working at other companies within the graphics department sort of noticed it. Yeah, it was helpful.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty amazing. You were self-aware of knowing that you needed to follow something you were more passionate about. Because I know for me, I still struggle with that. And yeah, it's cool to see that you discovered that so young and kind of went for it. So
For sure.
definitely, I think for anyone that's listening, following what you're interested in is definitely the North Star for
Yeah,
sure.
I think so, because I think one thing that maybe people forget is like people talk about the idea of like how do you stay inspired? Like research is a huge component of design. Like I think it's really important to do research. Like you're not strictly going on a whim, but at the same time, like there's things like intuition which can come into it, and I think that that's vitally important. But I also don't think they're different. I think they're the same thing. Research to me is what you do when the project is sort of launched, but intuition is what you've been doing your whole life. It's kind of like a built understanding. And that's not to say that like older people have more intuition necessarily. Like if they're not paying attention to a particular thing, like they're not going to have the same intuition as like a 15-year-old that's like super into it. But I do think that like understanding that like I had sort of a lifetime of knowledge around bikes, around sports, around kind of like design, and really kind of looking at these spaces that I was already paying attention to was really important. Like I think the idea of like, that people say like, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm not totally on board with that. Like work still work and it's going to feel that way at times. But I do think that if you can find something that you already feel a passion for, that you'd already be doing, even if you weren't getting paid, you're probably going to have more success because you're ultimately working on stuff that you're sort of intaking naturally. Like it's just stuff that you're going to be consuming and digesting and understanding, and then you can then bring that to the table. And I think that was why I've had some level of success within the cycling world is just that it's stuff that I was already engaged with prior to ever getting a paycheck.
Yeah. So I guess what would be your advice for somebody that's looking into breaking into a new field that they're passionate about, but maybe don't have experience in?
Yeah, it can be hard. I think that, everyone comes from different circumstances. Like I talked about before, like I spent a student loan to make a film. Like maybe not the advice that a financial planner would give you. I can actually guarantee that would not be good advice from a financial planner. But it was something that like I felt so strongly about. My partner Courtney understood that it was sort of this lifelong dream. Like I kind of grew up watching BMX videos and mountain bike videos, watching videos like MASH, like the fixed gear video, like kind of going like, I need to do something like this. Like I want to be in one of these, but ultimately like nobody's calling me. Like I wasn't that good a rider. So I was like, well, what if I just get my friends together and we try to do this? And yeah, it's you kind of have to put yourself in the position, I think, um, whether financially responsible or not. And I'm not saying anybody should go broke over trying to make an idea work, but you can find other avenues. Apply for a grant, try to get some financial backing, or just do something that's less expensive. Making a film wasn't cheap back then, certainly. But I think if you want to go into a particular space, whether that yeah, it's the bike world, ski world. You want to work on museums and galleries. Like, just find a way where you can start producing work where when you're sitting in front of somebody who's interviewing you, you can point to something in that portfolio and go like, this is understandable by them. Like they will get this. It's not miles away. I think really one of the most influential pieces of advice for me that I got, this is when I was in school, was the idea that good work equals more good work. And if you take advantage of those opportunities when you're young or when you're just starting out, and you kind of figure out where you're going, like where that North Star is, where you're attempting to get to. If you can position your work to kind of follow a path, like you're not going to start at the North Star. That's not going to happen. You're going to start doing grunt work on something that's, got a thread that might carry you through. But ultimately, like if you can put yourself in a position where you're actively participating in the type of work that you want, whether it's super small or at a larger scale, if you afford to do that, then I think people are going to see your work and see your portfolio and understand, okay, like this person, they could ultimately be of use to us, be an asset to us. And I review portfolios from people all the time that apply for jobs that, in some cases you see that where they're like, I painted my own bike, and it's like, well, sweet, that's what we do here. We paint bikes. So I can see a real one-to-one. But also, we see some people that are like, hey, like you know, I'm, I love bikes, but I haven't done any work on it in any form at all. And here's a bunch of web banners and things that I've done for, some corporate client. And it's like, okay, like I understand that your design skills are really good, but like it's much easier when you can see that connection point. So I think there's a way for somebody who's young and starting out to make a connection point with what they're working on. I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think that ties back into what you said earlier about not waiting for permission and just, yeah, just start building things that resonate with you.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's like the most important thing. Like when you're young, nobody's going to tell you to do something. Like you kind of have to take it and run with it. Like nobody told me to make a video. I just kind of thought, hey, well, I've seen other people do it. Why can't I? And then even with bikes, like there's another designer. His name's Garrett Chow. I don't know Garrett
Yeah, I
personally.
know him.
You know,
Yeah,
perfect. So I saw Garrett's work years ago. This was like way before I'd ever considered designing a bike.
amazing work. Yeah,
Unbelievable. Like I still to this day, like maybe my favorite designer that's ever worked in cycling.
yeah, very forward
And
thinking.
absolutely. And I think one thing that helped me at the time was I I understood that Garrett kind of came from a similar world. He was into track bikes, into skateboarding, into hardcore and punk, into graffiti, into street art, that kind of stuff. Like similar touch points to me, but a few years older. When I remember I saw he designed a bike for Mark Cavendish while he was Specialized, while he worked there. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, okay, wait a second. There's a person that comes from a similar background to me, similar interests, and they're designing at kind of like the highest level possible. Or at least that was my opinion at the time, designing for the sort of world-class athlete at a world-class leading brand. Like maybe this is possible. And I think that I can kind of give a bit of a nod to him as like a sort of an inspiration piece. If you can see somebody else like yourself doing something, it's often easier to imagine yourself doing it. And yeah, I think I took that and kind of ran with it. And like, I don't think like I'm certainly nobody special. Didn't grow up wealthy. You know, didn't even get to take art classes in high school for half the time. And it's ultimately like I was able to look at somebody like that and see, okay, like there's a way here to do this, and it's cool because I've now worked with Mark Cavendish multiple times, and now work at the same brand that Garrett did, and it's cool that way.
That's amazing. What's the toughest lesson you've had to learn?
Toughest, I don't know if there's like I don't know if there's like one toughest sort of lesson. Like there's a lot of different things that like you're going to go through as a designer, and it's one of those things that like it's not necessarily like a misstep. I think like when I worked at the ad agency, like understanding like being a designer wasn't going to be enough to hold my interests permanently. Like I got into design thinking I want to design magazines, skateboard magazines, ski magazines, that kind of stuff. And I got a chance to do that. And that was really cool. And I really enjoyed that. Didn't pay well, paid really badly, but was like I got to check that box really early on, first couple of years out of school. And then working in advertising and getting paid a bit more and realizing like, wait a second, okay, like financially maybe a touch more secure, but I hate going to the office. I don't like working on any of this stuff. Like that was maybe the biggest thing that I ever learned was like you have to do something, or I had to do something that really interested me. Like that was the impetus to being a designer in the first place. And I think maybe I lost sight of that a little bit, sort of 5 or 6 years out of school. Like I just kind of went like, oh, like, there's this sort of like ladder that you're supposed to climb. You start as a junior designer, intermediate, senior, art director, creative director, and I kind of always thought that I had to go that exact route. And like, there's plenty of reasons to do that, but for me, if what I was working on wasn't interesting, like it didn't matter if I was a junior designer or creative director. At the end of the day, it was just stuff that I didn't care if it sold. I didn't care if people wanted it. I didn't care if it didn't matter to me. And I don't want that to sound like that might come across as like even slightly snobby. Like it certainly wasn't that. It just wasn't stuff that was a touch point for me. Like I remember I had to do a project where we were making like a Christmas campaign for like a um sort of a big box retailer, and I just didn't really care. Like, it wasn't the thing that I set out to do as a designer. And so I had to make that change ultimately. Like, I found bikes, and bikes are cool. Uh, they're cool in my eyes, at least. It sort of relit a fire for me, and I've been doing this now for like 11 or 12 years now, something like that. So yeah, long time, maybe too long, but I still like it. I haven't burnt out on it yet.
Totally. Yeah, and I think it's okay. I think we all go through those phases of doing work that doesn't inspire us, and then we find work that does inspire us. And I think that's just part of life, like the ebb and flow. So,
100%. Absolutely. I completely
yeah.
agree. Like, I don't think that you're going to go through a design career where you don't work on stuff that's maybe outside your sphere of interest. Like, it's going to inevitably happen. I think for me, it was just trying to find that percentage balance where I could be more excited more of the time than, doing things that I didn't necessarily want to be doing.
Yeah, my biggest shock when I moved from the Bay Area after college and went to New York, I I went out to New York with a 3-month booking. So just me and my wife moved out there, and the biggest learning and biggest shock was I got booked by one of the most famous motion studios, and I was really proud and thankful for the experience. But when I got in there, I realized that these studios don't just only do amazing work; they also do a lot of the work that they just don't show it. And that was
100%.
really eye opening to me. I was really naive to that. I'm just going to work at the studio and just do amazing work. And then they had me working on little end tags for Chase Bank or something.
Yep.
So
They're paying the
yeah,
bills with that stuff. Like, I kind of feel that way even within my own job currently. Like, I think anybody that watches this, if they look me up, they'll probably just see my Instagram, and that's maybe like 10% of what I do within the job. Like, mostly that's like, you know, pro athlete bikes and pro teams, the stuff that kind of gets me sort of out of bed in the morning. But at the same time, like, we do hundreds of bikes a year that are for sale. Sometimes that can be absolutely engaging, and sometimes like it's just not quite at that level. Like, there's going to be variance within within any work that you're doing day to day. Like, there's going to be stuff that you're super stoked on. There's going to be stuff that's maybe it feels a little grunt worky, and that's okay. Like, as long as you can get the balance right, I think that's the key.
yeah, yeah. I want to wind down, but I have a question for you, and I'm curious if you have an answer. Is have you figured out how to juggle multiple projects in a way that feels sustainable and not like you're reinventing the wheel every time a new project comes in?
I think this is the question we all want to answer. I don't
I
know.
know,
I don't.
right?
I don't know if there is an answer. I have not. I think for me, I think I'm self motivated, like really self motivated, and just like I understand that there, like I it goes back to that good work equals more good work notion that I learned years ago. Like I very much believe in that. And then ultimately, I understand that my level of success within this doesn't just impact me; it also impacts my partner. And so it's trying to find a balance. within those projects where you can give everything to stuff that feels very important and maybe find ways where, yeah, you can use from or take from things that you've maybe previously done, or you can recycle or rehash or bring into projects that maybe aren't quite at that level that need complete attention. And that's not to say to be lazy about them. I don't want it to be interpreted that way. But I do think if you're going to have a career with any sort of longevity, you're going to have ideas that ultimately weren't used. And I think that there's ways to balance that. My preferred way of working is to do one project and focus as hard as I can on that project and finish it and then move on. That's not always doable. I'm thankful I have a coordinator at work, our design coordinator, Morgan. She's able to kind of help us steer not just my schedule, but the whole team's schedules so that we try to give space where we can so that people aren't too overloaded, but at the same time, like it's inevitably going to happen. And I think it's on the designers to recognize when something needs that extra bit of time. Like there was a project recently that won't come out till the end of the year, but I was asked to design something for an athlete. I generally come with two ideas to make sure that I've captured everything that they're looking for. And I felt super strong about one idea. It was like, this one's it. And then I had one that, although it wasn't bad, I didn't love it. Like I was like, okay, it's a secondary option, but it just feels kind of weak to me. And so that was on a Thursday at 4 o'clock, and we were presenting it Friday morning at 11. And, I threw away option two and I stayed up far too late and did it. And again, it comes back to like, yeah, I've made a million bikes, but if you don't have the desire in you and you don't have that drive to make sure that it's the best you can possibly make it, like you're not going to step. You're just going to give that secondary option that's not that great. And that's not to say that I'm some like, great designer because of it, but ultimately I think it was just me personally. I couldn't live with that second idea, and I had to just sort of recognize like, okay, this is the time where I just take my L and stay up late and try and figure it out.
Yeah. What's next for you? You have anything exciting on the horizon?
In terms of work, there's always exciting stuff. That's the beauty of Specialized. We make a lot of stuff, so there's plenty to come. I like working on the race stuff. That's my main interest there. You got tons of that coming down the pipe. But yeah, just on a personal level, I really like to travel. I think it's where a lot of inspiration and kind of that like, you know, I need to sort of turn my brain off. I can't just sort of live working constantly. I have to be able to turn off. And I think that's kind of where that, you can kind of pull in those pieces of inspiration that might come and help you down the line. And so we're going to be over in Zurich and Berlin later this month. Never been to either, so really excited about that. I've been to Europe before, but never either of those parts. Yeah, really really stoked. And as somebody who grew up in the punk and hardcore scene, Berlin's always been like a real destination that I've wanted to see. So stoked.
Yeah. I'll follow up with an email with my friend Erman, who has a shoe company called Zebraham. I think you'll be super into it. But
Oh
he
yeah,
used to be the creative director at Adidas and in Gorewire for quite a while.
nice.
Maybe you two can connect.
Hell yeah, I'd love that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so one last thing. Is there something deep down that you believe in that you think people should hear that you can leave the audience with?
For sure. Yeah, I think that it's not design related. I think it's more of just like a take on the world. I feel really like we as I think humans in general often feel like we're the center of the universe. I strongly oppose that idea just outright. We share this planet with a lot of other sentient creatures. We are ultimately sort of stewards of this planet, and I think that for me, finding veganism over 20 years ago, I think was the most cataclysmic change in my life to understand that to treat every animal on this planet with as much respect as I would any other person on this planet, and to really understand that we're not going to improve our environment by continuing to slaughter animals day in and day out, billions daily. It's one of those things where I think that we have to kind of take a hard look in the mirror. There's a lot of talk about what we can do for the planet to, lower emissions, help with global warming. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, there's nothing easier. People talk about the rainforest being cut down. Well, the reason the rainforest is being cut down is so they can grow soy to feed livestock and then create pasture for livestock. And ultimately, like, I want to see a more peaceful planet, a more peaceful world. And I think that through vegetarianism and veganism, I think we can at least kind of start going in that direction. So it's way outside of design, but I think that it's
Yeah.
the thing that I care about the most in this world. So yeah, definitely important.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. And yeah, it was great chatting with you.
Yeah, dude, it was awesome. I really appreciate you reaching out. This was super fun. So thank you.
All right, that's our show for today. If you like this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. It all really helps out. If you have any questions about creativity, process, or anything in between, please drop a comment. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I'd love to hear from you. You can follow along at Broken Coastal on Instagram and YouTube. Subscribe to my newsletter. It's absolutely free, a weekly dose of inspiration at the intersection of design and outdoors. You'll love it. Thanks for being here. Cheers.